Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Guna Fanzine Arsenal Women podcast. Today's podcast is a big one. We've got two huge games to dissect and another one to look ahead to this weekend and next week, in fact. Not a fantastic week for Arsenal, all in all, really. A draw to Chelsea and then a very disappointing loss to Bayern Munich. But before we start, I just want to mention how sad I was to see the news about Katie Reid. Obviously, every single ACL injury is completely devastating, but to see Katie Reid, who's just had the most fantastic start to life as a regular in the Arsenal first team, then getting her first England call up. It's just devastating, and we do really wish her all the best in her recovery. I bet you're upset about that one as well, Daisy.
Absolutely. I think it caught me off guard, and I did have some suspicions about why she was absent from the squad because the injury obviously originally that saw her miss out from the England, obviously after getting selected, and then obviously not being able to play, which is and having to withdraw, which is obviously gutting in itself. And then there's been a lot of times I think with Arsenal where they become quite suspicious about injuries and they start it off with this, they're going to miss this game, and then all of a sudden it adds up and you start to think if there's something bigger going on. But I was not expecting that. Like, I mean, for it to happen in training again, after obviously we had the Manu Zinsberger one, then we saw a similar scenario with Michelle Agerman, obviously on loan at Brighton, but technically an Arsenal player, doing it on international duty. And the summer that she had, it's a similar story really, and everyone
Yeah.
obviously looks at it from a positive light in terms of they're young and they'll come back, but it's just happening. I think we had a discussion like 1 or 2 weeks ago. It's happening way too often. And, how many times do we have to come on these podcasts or on these articles and say, it's a problem before it really is being addressed by people, that are in a higher power with more authority than we are.
Yeah, it certainly does need a lot more research. But if we turn our focus back to last weekend, which actually feels like ages ago since that Chelsea game now, we've been through a lot. But firstly, want to celebrate a really cool video which featured some of our podcast that went out ahead of the Chelsea game.
Yeah, I mean, big shout out to Marv, who I hope is watching because he's been telling me that he watches every single podcast episode. So this is the true test because if I don't get a message from him, it means he hasn't watched our episode, is he? So maybe it's just Freddie that he likes, and it is a little he's missing out on ours. But no, like the video, obviously we didn't expect that. We weren't prepared, but we said some very sort of dramatic statements which
Yeah.
he used and some clips and set it up for a really cool video, which in itself I think is great to see content wise because we were both having a discussion, me and him saying there's not enough of this Arsenal women content, directly for the women's team, not just as a side section of the club or of the men's side. So it's great to see that. So yeah, thank you to him for putting it in, and obviously it was a huge game, which I know you're going to get into, but it's nice to see content like that going into these big derbies and see a bit more rivalry, I think, which we always seem to really, really want in women's football.
Yeah, I loved the video and it just it's a bit like similar to the videos they'll play before the players come out of the tunnel in the stadium, and I always love them. It really gets you going. And that's exactly what women's football needs is really big build up and stop the niceties and just get that rivalry going and videos like that. It just really helps. And I'm glad that stuff we said on the pod can feature it and stuff like that is really cool. But Arsenal getting the 1-1 draw to Chelsea in front of an almost sold out Emirates. Alyssa Thompson put the visitors up early, and then Alessia Russo equalised much later in the game after some controversial decisions across the board. I think most people may have taken the 1-1 draw before the game, but of course a win would have been better. But it's Chelsea and they're very hard to beat. However, there were refereeing decisions throughout that left everyone in the stadium confused. Daisy, what were your thoughts on the matter? Was Stina Blackstenius' goal rightly chalked off? I know what I think.
I think there's very few people, even Chelsea fans, neutrals coming into that and saying that that was a handball. I mean, the replays, I'm not sure what went on. I think when I was talking about it with someone, I said the frustration mainly came from the fact that it took so long to make that decision. I mean, we don't obviously have VAR in women's football, which is a whole nother discussion, but on-field decisions are what count at the end of the day. And we had pretty much in the crowd celebrated the entire song that they play when a player scores, jumped up and down. It must have been, it felt like minutes after. Obviously, it wasn't, but it did feel like that. And it literally took me looking at the scoreboard to realise that it hadn't been given. There was no sort of, I kind of thought it had gone back to Hannah Hampton and we were already sort of 1-1 going into the game again. It sounds silly, but that really was the case because we were still celebrating. But yeah, obviously a silly decision and lots of, I think, big decisions that didn't go our way and didn't really favour any. I mean, there was situations in these big games where you think a referee make or breaks the big games, and it's a shame that it comes down to that rather than two teams going against each other who, you know. Arsenal, I think, for the majority of that game outplayed Chelsea, which is a huge positive. And looking at that game alone was a big sign of what was maybe to come from Arsenal. You know, going into the derby, doing really well, performing well, being done by unjust decisions. So it is a bit difficult now, obviously looking at the two games together. But at the time, after that game, I really thought great performance. A shame that we were sort of robbed of the 3 points because I think everybody knows that realistically we should have won that game.
Yeah, and in the WSL, every single point counts
Mhm.
because there's so few matches in a season. It's not like the men's game where something like this, you can get over it a little bit quicker because they play double the amount of fixtures. But with the women's game, dropping 2 points now for Arsenal, especially with the shaky start to the season that they'd had, this could be really crucial when it comes to May and you're deciding who's going to get to play Champions League football the season after or who's going to win the league. And it's just, yeah, it's crazy that small margins like that decide these big games and that small margins can't be, if they don't get them right, it's out of the hands of the players. You can play as well as you want, but if there's a referee making the wrong decision one, two, three times, then you have to settle for the 1 point. And I think everyone was rightly disappointed after that game. But yeah, those decisions that they've got to make it work. I don't know whether it's VAR or whatever, but it almost felt like VAR was in play. That's how long the decision took, and that's kind of what you're saying, being in the stands. I sadly wasn't there, so I had the notification on my phone. Black Sinis had scored. I was sitting with a Chelsea fan. I was like, ha ha, and then she turned me around, ha ha, it's been taken away. I was going, what? And everyone was texting me, what's happened? What's happening? I'm not there. I don't know, but yeah, really disappointing. And I think it probably could have changed the momentum of the game slightly. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah, very, and also very rarely, what you said then, very rarely do you have a moment where it actually comes up as a notification, which actually shows as well, even for you at home, like that's how how long it took to make the decision. Because usually, obviously, it's straight away offside, straight away handball, no appeals from any of the Chelsea players either,
Yeah.
which I think showed. But yeah, momentum. I think Arsenal had the momentum throughout most of that game. First 10 minutes, they Chelsea were all over us. I started to fear that maybe we were not, because you always don't know with Arsenal whether they're going to come into a big game sort of head down, get on with it, you know, fight for the points, or they're going to go into a game a little bit sheepish, which they have done a lot recently. But I thought, you know, once they settled in a little bit, I didn't think that was how we were going to concede either. I don't know about you, but I kind of thought some kind of set piece or Aggie Beaver Jones, but that obviously she wasn't in the squad, so it was already a surprise. But I think it, looking at the bigger picture of Arsenal this season, it's another, if we look at the goal that Thompson scored, it is another one where I think could we have done better defensively. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think it was a little bit of sort of a switch off moment from the back line in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you if you think Renee Segger's got her tactics right in that game because I wasn't convinced totally of the midfield pivot, for example. And I know we speak about this all the time, but it was a game without Kim Little, and it just shows the gap she leads. Chelsea were able to run straight through the midfield at points in the game, and that's kind of where players like Alyssa Thompson are so dangerous. And I felt maybe that Kyra Cooney-Cross could have been a better option than Pullover in this game. So I feel she makes more of a nuisance of herself in the middle and is quite good at going back defensively. So I don't know what you thought about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the midfield is forever the discussion. I don't think we're ever going to sit here with with be happy, and even
Going,
you know we
yay.
don't even know what that ideal team looks like. And I literally said I said I wish one day we could play Chelsea with the ideal team, like with our no players injured and our first choice, but we don't even know what that is, and it doesn't seem like Renee does either. Really shocked to see Pullover included, not because of her talent, just because, like you say, the magnitude of the game. She didn't feature before. If she was going to play the big game, you know. Maybe she should have been dropped in Leicester or got some minutes or started to play that midfield three. Marnham also didn't get the start, which I think she shows up in the big games at the Emirates a lot of the time. I was looking at the goals that she scored, you know, Manchester United, City, she got one. She does tend to show up at the Emirates in those big moments, so surprised not to see her. And I agree with you. I don't think that midfield works as a three. I think Alessia Russo is probably our best forward and our best midfielder in that game, to be honest, which
Yeah.
says a lot. And I think if you look at obviously going into the next game, how that midfield panned out again, the same problems. Arsenal quite exposed on the counter attack, and kind of trying to outscore opponents and try and, you know, I was going to say go ahead early, but even that doesn't work because we seem to be so vulnerable in counter scenarios or just switching off completely. But yeah, we will get onto that. But I do agree with you. I think that midfield was interesting, and it's very interesting that she's sort of playing Kyra for the last 10, 15 minutes, but
Yeah.
not really seeing her as somebody who could control that midfield, especially in Kim's absence.
Because she's got great control, Kyra, and it baffles me, and I'd like to think that Renee's got a method to her madness, but it's difficult to see the wood from the trees at the moment. Just one more on the WSL. What do you think about that title race now? Because I'm in the mindset, and I'm sorry if this is negative, but I think we're too far gone now to win the WSL. Unless something seriously happens to those Manchester teams that means we're up really close to Chelsea, or something happens to Chelsea, I just don't see Arsenal being able to compete even maybe for second place at this point. I don't know if you agree. It's just too strong.
I do agree with you, and it is a shame to say, but we did go into it last week and basically say if we didn't win, obviously we didn't expect it to be if we didn't win because of the way that we didn't win, but
Mm.
if we didn't get 3 points, whatever that would be, it probably wouldn't be enough. Bigger concern is probably how we, get enough momentum to get Champions League positions. There's
Yeah.
lots of great teams. You've spoken about Manchester teams there, like other people around Chelsea, not even just Chelsea, that are really pushing and I think have it to go all the way with Chelsea and take them to the and especially in the big games if they can make or break Chelsea down. I mean, I'm not convinced by Chelsea. This is not to be sort of bitter or anything like that. I don't think they, you know. I wonder if they have what it takes to go all the way. They do tend to get the win or get the points where they need to, but I do worry that this isn't a long-term solution. But for Arsenal, it's even worse. So I can't really say that to be honest. But yeah, I think the title race is probably done, and our biggest focus now has got to be on winning every single game, which we're going to continue to say every season, apparently.
Yeah, and it would be good to see maybe one of those domestic cups coming back. An FA Cup wouldn't look too bad in that trophy cabinet. But yeah, we'll
Yeah,
have
we've
to turn
dropped off
focus
from
to
our
that.
quadruple
Yeah.
to our one FA Cup that we might get. We do this every
Yeah.
season, I think. I don't know.
I
Yeah, we did
know.
this last season, didn't we? And then we ended up with the Champions League. So
Not
never say
bad.
never. Let's just aim for a little Subway Cup, and then anything extra is a bonus.
But on to the more disappointing result of the two, Bayern Munich. So Arsenal's Champions League title defense not really going quite to plan. And with this new league phase format, it almost feels like there's more, less margin for error. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got to perform in every game, and Arsenal have already lost twice so far. So a fantastic first half if we want to focus on the positives. Let's do that first. Arsenal pressed really well. Bayern Munich just couldn't get out of their own half. An early goal by Emily Fox. Nice to see her scoring. And I think Arsenal could have had two or three more, but a really good start. So talk me through your thoughts on that before we go on to the negatives.
Yeah, I think we should just let's just leave it at the first half and
Yeah,
pretend
okay.
that's how the game ended because I think most of us had thought that that was as much as you don't want to be too confident or too cocky. We kind of thought 2-0 and confident in that game and probably the best I've seen Arsenal play in that first half in a long time in terms of every part of the system seemed to work really well. Mariona Caldente had a really good first half and I even reluctantly for some reason I seem to jinx it every time commented on Twitter and put a tweet out saying how Lotte Wubben-Moy was having a great first half. And to be fair, the whole back line were, I thought they were phenomenal, and the front line, everything was working and clicking, and all was happy. And then, yeah, it all went downhill from there. But in terms of like the pressing, I think you pointed that out. That for me was something that I think this season Arsenal have struggled with. I don't think they put teams under pressure, and straight from the start, Bayern Munich looked shaky. They looked nervous, and Arsenal were actually capitalising on that rather than letting teams play out like they did Chelsea. I think a lot in that first half they didn't put too much pressure on Chelsea, but it's nice to see that improvement. But yeah, good goals. I mean, Mariona's was fantastic. And I thought we were as confident as it sounds. I thought we were home and dry, mainly because Bayern Munich didn't put up the fight that I thought they would. Little did I know that was going to come in the second half, but yeah, obviously we saw what happened after that.
Yeah, so something changed for Bayern Munich. They switched themselves on a bit, and perhaps Arsenal maybe should have parked the bus a bit more rather than continuing their press. I don't know. The subs were wrong. Bayern ended up coming back and winning 3-2. So what went wrong? Can you put your finger on it at all? But I thought it was just baffling.
It really was because I think you can maybe understand. I think I said the first goal from Bayern I can maybe understand because they're going to come into that second half. They're obviously 2-0 down. They needed the win as much as Arsenal did. I think people forget Bayern kind of lost to Barcelona quite. They sort of a thrash by Barcelona. I think they won this second game or no, there was narrow. There wasn't. It was like a 1-0
Yeah,
against Juventus.
2-1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Narrow victory for them. So they really needed this win as much as Arsenal did. So they were always going to try and fight back a little bit, and Arsenal to concede one, potentially not so bad. But I mean, the manner of the goals conceded in some of them, and the way that we just kind of crumbled is going back to this whole discussion about confidence and Arsenal using momentum and how they sort of manage the game. And I think that's been an aspect of Rene Slager's management that we've outlined as potentially an issue. It could be an experience thing, an age thing. It could be not being able to utilize the squad to the way that she wanted to. I did see a lot of tweets about the substitutions, and they were kind of blamed for the reason that we didn't. That we lost that game. But I also think it would be fair to say that if Rene hadn't made those substitutions, the same people would be on Twitter saying she didn't make any changes and it cost us. So I can understand why she sort of wanted to switch things up. It doesn't look like Chloe Kelly's fully fit to me, so that was an interesting
No.
substitution. Potentially made and taking Caitlin Ford off. I think she's been phenomenal. She's been fantastic. I'm going to let you speak
Yeah.
about that because you sort of I feel like you were going to point that out because her and Beth Mead I think really did well in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of those, definitely. I didn't have it written down to talk about, but well, you've brought it up, and I just think that those two on the wings was working so well, and Beth Mead seems to be really coming alive in these Champions League matches, and Caitlin Ford also. She's so hard when she starts dribbling with the ball. She's so hard to beat. She's got a really unique style with that, and I just thought to take those off when they were really in their prime of the game, to be honest, was a big mistake. And I totally agree with you in terms of people would have complained if the subs hadn't been made because that complaint has happened before. That was a complaint made a lot about Jonas Eidevall, for example. But to bring Chloe Kelly on in that situation when she's definitely not fully fit, I think we can all work that one out. It's just it felt silly. And I think similar with Olivia Smith, I don't think
Yeah.
she's particularly completely fit either. So whether Beth Mead and Caitlin Ford can't play a whole game, but surely, I mean, the way they were playing, they looked like they weren't ready to stop anytime soon.
Yeah, we don't know like this is the difficulty. We don't know the ins and outs of how much, and I think when you're trying to respond to a game, you don't know how many minutes each player can play. I think the decision to bring Olivia Smith on, maybe it might be to do with minutes. In that case, it's understandable. But if it's not, to leave it that late when you've got that kind of player who can really sort of take things up a notch again when things went a bit stale for Arsenal towards the sort of 60th minute when they were looking at the substitutions. If Olivia Smith can play those minutes and in the big Champions League game, that's who you want. I mean, bringing her on with little time to go and then going, right, buying her all over
Something.
us, go and do something. It's just not fair at all. And it's looking like she's going to keep using the same substitutions, which I think maybe upset or frustrated people in a way because it's very predictable that Chloe Kelly's going to come on at around that time.
Yeah.
And usually this black playing Blackstenius thing, obviously with Russo, I think we're back to that point again. Does it work? Does it not work? I feel like I'm just so on the fence. I don't know about you. I'm just so on the fence because obviously we've seen it working and we've seen Russo. I mean, she's just an incredible player, but we've seen it kind of working a little bit. But at the same time, it leaves absolutely nothing for Arsenal to do off the bench. I don't know if you kind of agree with that, but it's sort of making Arsenal's substitutions quite predictable and not having so much of an impact as the game's going on to not have sort of Blackstenius coming on.
Yeah, because she is a really good impact sub. But with the way she's been playing recently, which she's been playing really well, it kind of feels like a waste to have her on the bench for 65, 70 minutes. So I kind of get where Renee's coming from there in that if Alessia Russo and Stina Blackstenius have worked out how to play together, which they have a bit, they're looking like they're clicking a bit more, and Russo's getting used to that 10 position when Stina's on the pitch. It just yeah, it's a really difficult situation to be in because you're not going to bench Stina, but you do need someone like Stina, which is where it would be great if we had the likes of Michelle Adjumang, for example. If they're going to start Stina, then having someone like Michelle to come on and play that role or an equivalent, then that's where you need that squad depth there. And I think that's maybe what Arsenal are missing. Because you've got great squad depth in the wings, but maybe not in the centre of the forward line. And it's looking similar in defence. That defensive line looking shaky without Leah Williamson, no Katie Reid. A lot of women were coming in after having not played a lot of football. You've got Gilligan on the bench again, not hasn't played a lot of football. It's really, really tricky to get right. And how can you expect those players to be full of confidence and ready to play their best football if they haven't been trusted earlier in the season when everyone else was fit? I think that's my opinion on it.
I agree with you completely, and I think Lotta, obviously, I said like she had a good start to the game, and I think we've talked about pace. Defensive pace is a problem, recovery without Leah Williamson, like you say, and without having those sort of fast players that Arsenal haven't been recruiting. it is a problem when Arsenal are sort of caught out on the counter attack, and it's not something that I think has been considered. I think when Arsenal lose a game like that in the way that they did, everybody goes back to this big discussion. If we win or which is fair enough, if we win or we have a really good performance against Chelsea, the discussion gets sort of dropped or is quiet. And then as soon as that happens, we're back to this overarching thing of, are we investing enough in the club? Are we buying the right players? Are we giving Rene the biggest opportunity to succeed? And the biggest talking point that I saw on social media was that we're just not helping Rene enough by getting the right players or actually building the squad up. I mean, of course, we've had Olivia Smith, Chloe Kelly, Taylor Hanson. We've had fantastic signings, there's no doubt, but are we continuing to be sensible about the areas that we're recruiting? We let Leah Volti go, which I mean, I can't help but think in a game like this, she would have been the perfect player in that midfield. And it's those moments where you just think Arsenal didn't prepare for that, and they're sort of looking at the fact that you can't rely on Kim Little forever, but it is looking like we might have to rely on Kim Little forever because there's nobody that can come in and kind of fill that void and fill that gap. So maybe it is back to that overarching issue of, have Arsenal been invested in every position, and are they actually prepared to have impact players off the bench, to have these injuries and be able to cope in the same way that the likes of Chelsea have.
Yeah, and they need that depth to be able to compete across the four competitions, and that elusive top four finish in the league phase is looking less and less likely. It just means Arsenal have made more work for themselves basically, because if they make it into the eight, then they have to do a two-legged qualifier in February when the calendar's already quite tight. You've got Manchester City at home and Brighton away, both fixtures that Arsenal didn't win last season. So adding two more into the mix there is not ideal. But Freddie was out in Munich and spoke to Renée Segers after the game and asked her about managing emotions ahead of this weekend's North London derby. And she said, "You've got to accept how you feel. That's the best strategy. Then it's going to demand a lot of self-management for players and staff to turn things around. But think having something new to look forward to is actually a good thing. There's no other option. We have to be in here and now. We can't think about the past. We have to be in here and now. We have to start preparing for Tottenham." And they really do. They don't have another option. 2:30 on Sunday. How key is this fixture?
I mean, this is huge, and obviously we said about Chelsea game coming at maybe the wrong time slightly because Arsenal started to build momentum, and maybe that game was going to be too big for them. Maybe they needed to sort of keep, playing sort of lower level teams and build a bit of rhythm. But then they went into that Chelsea game, impressed, were incredible. So I thought, here we go. But I don't know why, but I just feel like Arsenal don't seem to take these two competitions in the same way. I don't know if that's a silly thing to say, but they kind of. I think Rene's got it in the head that it's two different things, or it definitely feels that way from the outside. It's a huge game. Obviously, I think in the past we've looked at Spurs as potentially not as close of a rival as the likes of Chelsea, in terms of like the ability to compete, and that's just a reflection of, I think, them not investing as much in their players and having sort of the same level of quality that Arsenal had. But I don't know about you, but I'm probably more scared than I've ever been to play Tottenham. It pains me to say, but they look good and they definitely have threats that we know Arsenal will be exposed by if they're not on their top game. We don't have all the players back that we want back. We don't have that full strength squad. But I just feel too often maybe we sit there and feel sorry for ourselves, or this is a situation we're in and we can't help that, and we can't use it as an excuse that we don't have all of our players fit. And I really want these players to step up, and I thought in the first half against Bayern they maybe were going to, but it doesn't seem that way. But this is obviously, if you lose this, it's a huge, not only for obviously the WSL and the league, but it's pride, isn't it? You can't lose this. You can't lose the North London derby.
You can't, especially as you said there, after a few seasons of really dominating it. I think only
Mhm.
one loss for Arsenal in the last however many games, apart from the pre-season one this season, which is playing in my head is a worry. And I think this is definitely expected to be a bit of a tighter matchup than it has been. And that is scary. And I think Arsenal really need to live up to the occasion. They do well on a big occasion under pressure often. You saw it against Chelsea. And perhaps this against Bayern Munich, that's why they started well, but then they felt there was no pressure because they're 2-0 up. But it's a very dangerous scoreline because it's quite easy to come back from it. And once it becomes 2-2, the momentum's not with you at all. And so I wonder whether that kind of pressure might help Arsenal out slightly. Against Tottenham, they might feel they need kind of a bit of revenge on the fact that the decisions went against them last weekend. I'm disappointed it's not at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. That's another thing I'd love to mention because it's a men's international break and someone could have gone in the calendar. Oh, that's a big one. Let's do that at the stadium instead of the boxing. But that's nothing we can do about it. But it's so key for morale, for emotions, for derbies, for rivalries, for the league. Arsenal have got to perform. And yeah, I'm intrigued to see the lineup Rennie goes for, basically.
Yeah, I think we weren't expecting the same lineup for Bayern, or at least I wasn't. I don't know if you were, but like I thought some changes may be made because there were obvious errors. That there was an incident I think with Palova in the Chelsea game, which I think we can't ignore because we did talk about the
Yeah,
dodgy decisions that sort of
true.
went against Arsenal. There obviously was a Palova potential red card and Alessio Russo's goal also borderline offside, but probably given to make up for the fact that Cena didn't
Yeah.
handball. So you know that there's obviously that was a poor officiating performance overall. But if you look at the big game that we've got, you know, the referees have got to get it right first and foremost. But so have Arsenal, and I would be keen to see some changes, mainly because I don't think you want to go in with the same 11 and the same sort of, I feel like it's just a carry on from what we've done at Bayern. Changes, I'm going to keep saying this every week. I really hope we see Cooney Cross. I don't know how much times we need to say, I hope we see Cooney Cross start before she does. Taylor Hines, I think, has a case for starting that game potentially. She's just proving herself week in, week out. And I expect a lot of similarities, of course. Renee does tend to get sort of stuck in her ways sometimes and play the same players, and maybe she's trying to build some momentum and continuity in that side. But yeah, lots of question marks at this point, and it's so hard to predict with her. Like, you do not know what you're going to get most of the time.
Yeah, I completely agree. She's hard to read, even in her press conferences. It's always the same message. I know that's the same with all managers. It's the media training, but this is a derby, and I'd love to hear from her in a kind of her getting excited about the rivalry. I wonder what the press conference is tomorrow. I'm going to do that on Zoom, and I'd love to see her getting excited and fueled up about the rivalry and see how that translates across the players rather than the party line of it's just another game. We've got to win every game. You make it exciting, make it an occasion without putting the pressure on, or maybe do put the pressure on. I think these girls need pressure, to maybe step up and perform. Hopefully, I think, if you're an Arsenal player, this is a huge fixture in the calendar and it should translate across. But they've got to win it, and 3 points is really necessary. Just for mainly for morale. It's not even for the league anymore, as we said earlier. I don't think that's even in the realm at the moment. But just to try and boost everyone's hopes, the fans as well. I think yeah, it's been a tricky couple of games for the fans, but another one next week. I don't know if we're going to record before this, so I thought I would talk about it now. Real Madrid at Meadow Park next week. Another scarring one for the fans. They've already beaten Roma and PSG in the Champions League and drawn to Paris FC. They'll probably be wanting revenge this time for last year's quarter final. What do you think?
Yeah, it feels like the fixtures are just coming thick and fast. Like
Yeah.
the fact we're going on, and I forgot we'd even played. We hadn't talked about Chelsea yet, but yeah, of course, like the focus is on the weekend. But looking forward to that game. First of all, I'm looking forward to being back at Meadow Park. I didn't go to Bayern away, unfortunately. Maybe gladly now, but I've heard that it's a great place to go, and there was lots of travelling fans there and a great stadium as well. But yeah, I'm really excited to have it Champions League back at Meadow Park. Obviously, the Lyon game a difficult result, but good performance, I thought. So it's
Mhm.
again, it's we tend to have a lot of positive performances at Meadow Park. Obviously, Real Madrid last time we played, I'm at the Emirates, but I still think there's this is a huge opportunity for Arsenal. Probably out of the fixtures, potentially nothing's easy, but if we're looking at as easier, obviously we pinpointed Benfica and Real Madrid probably as the ones that would be on paper easier. No game is easy for this team, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that one, and I'm hoping that Real Madrid aren't going to come into it all guns blazing. But um, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, and it seems like crazy that we're still saying Arsenal have to win every game, have to win every game. But like you say, the pressure is all we knew last season because obviously when Rene came in, we had to win every game. So maybe we just keep that going and always go on the assumption that we have to win every single game, and the pressure is always there, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I think it'll be good to host Real Madrid again. That was still one of my favorite games I've ever been to, was the
Hmm.
second leg at Emirates, and just a brilliant crowd, and it always is at Meadow Park. So, fingers crossed that that'll be a good one. But thank you very much, Daisy, and we'll see you all next week, hopefully with some positive dissections of Tottenham game and the Real Madrid game. Fingers crossed for a bit more of a positive conversation. But please keep checking out the new Guna Fanzine Women's Edition. There's some fantastic pieces in there, and it's available to buy online, and we ship worldwide, so it doesn't matter if you're not in the UK. And please also do like this video and subscribe to the podcast if you can. I'll be at Brisbane Road on Sunday with all the usual Guna Fanzine coverage. You'll be with the fans, Daisy.
I'm not going actually, which is
Not
a huge
going.
shame. And this is one of the
I'm
ones that
worried.
it's haunting me that I've missed, and now I think I'm starting to jinx it sometimes. But
Yeah, I'm
let's hope
worried you're
not.
like a mascot that's maybe not.
Potentially that's why they've not performed. It's because I wasn't there. But please don't put the blame on me if we don't perform
Sorry.
again, guys. But next week I'll be there at Real Madrid. But
Well,
yeah,
Susie put the blame on herself because
she
she
did.
said she's missed both Bayern Munich trips away, and they've lost both of those. So Susie's going to be there on Sunday, so that's
So we're
good.
going to win. Thank you to
So
Susie for the
we're
win
going to
on
win,
Sunday. Yeah.
and some fantastic photographs. So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah, thank you very much.